Awesome, guys. Super excited for this next segment with Patrick Combs. This guy's been a mentor of mine in many ways, and definitely someone I look up to. He's said some pretty impactful things, and many, sometimes it's just one sentence you need to hear, and he has just an incredible way of delivering that, and making very poignant points. Has a very interesting life. He's run a one-man show that was really impressive, and has a book about kind of having a battle with the bank, which is really interesting. He's an amazing writer, and just an incredible deep human being that I'm honored to be able to have him share his wisdom with you guys. So with that said, Patrick, I'll let you take it from here, and really appreciate you coming on here.
Well, thank you, Tim, and the whole team behind it for organizing the Global Hope Summit. It is my pleasure to be here. So thank you so much, buddy. It's really amazing this is happening. So hello, everybody. My name is Patrick. And since we're going to talk about Be Here Wow, and that's really going to be a conversation about how you can get peace, security, and joy during these really interesting times, let's start with a bit of presence practice. We'll just dive right into it, and then we'll unfold the conversation. So the first thing that you want to do is really drop into the present moment. And the best way to drop into any present moment is to tune into your five senses. Because if you're tuned into your five senses, it is more difficult for your thoughts to run away from you. So literally, one pathway is to take one deep breath and watch yourself breathe. I usually watch my chest, from my chest to my stomach, to the stomach closing, to the lungs getting smaller, to maybe the breath leaving your mouth. One conscious breath is anchoring into the present moment. You can be positive, like, oh, I'm being present because I felt the air and the body shifts, and I feel the air leaving my lips. So that's presence. The other thing that is the immediate way to presence is touch something near you right now. Just because if you're feeling something through your hands, you're here. The other thing is you can listen, like, what are the sounds happening? There's my voice. What other sound do you hear? Okay. So through your five senses is the fastest way to get to a way of living that I'm going to describe constantly as the presence practice. That is nothing short, at least on my path, by my experience for the last 7 years, life-changing, transformational, miraculous. So hopefully you're here now. So why is this be here now thing even a thing? Like, why don't we just presume, look, you can't not be where you are? So because most people rarely are where they are. Most people are living their life in what I call hallucinations. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story in a second, but it's very clear to me now the difference between real life and hallucinations. So what is this hallucination I'm referring to? If you're thinking about the future, if you're daydreaming about the future, if you're, let's say, watching a movie, and instead of watching the movie, you actually start picturing what might happen at the election time, you're in a hallucination. You see that? Because that means instead of watching the movie or feeling the couch that you were sitting on or hearing the sounds around you in the present real life, you were in a fantasy about a scenario in an imaginary future. That's straight up a hallucination. It's just never been labeled that. The past is the same scenario. You're sitting on your couch and you want to enjoy a movie. But one of the scenes, I guess, gets a little too slow, and you're suddenly, without your knowing this, you're thinking about the past. You're going over an argument that you had, or a scenario that you didn't like, or a scenario you loved that you missed. And you're rehashing it. And you're no longer in your living room on a couch. For all intents and purposes, your body is. But where is your mind? Your mind is in an imaginary past, which is a hallucination. And one thing that a presence practice constantly calls you to do is recognize that the future can only exist in your imagination. And the past can only exist in your imagination. Because if in either I say, well, if they're real, take me there, you can't. You'll be able to say, I'll take you to the future, just wait 3 seconds. So I go 1001, 1002, 1003. I never left the present moment. And at the count of 3, I'm still in the present moment. Okay. So a presence practice means be here now instead of in hallucinations of the future or of the past. Now, over the course of our short time together, I want to unfold a lot more techniques for that, but most of all, the why, the unbelievable impact of this simple and very challenging process. So you know nothing about me, right? So here's just maybe the only thing that's pertinent. I'm 54 years old. In 2013, which is what, 7 years ago, I was approximately 47 years old. And I noticed that I had an addiction that was causing me a lot of problems, an increasing amount of problems, a very real addiction that's very rarely spoken about. Now, the reason why I noticed it is because my life was just getting worse. I was just suffering more from emotional distraught and messes and mental distraught, okay, suffering. And so I began August 2013, I began to say, man, there's got to be a better way. And that's when, shortly after that, I noticed that I had an addiction. You have, scientists tell us that you have, and I have, 88,000 thoughts a day, approximately. Here's what I know now by experience within myself, and I can tell you about you and everybody. Almost every single person on the planet, the wild vast majority, those 88,000 thoughts are almost entirely repetitive, wasteful, worrisome, ridiculous, unnecessary. Almost all of them. Here's the thing. A lot of those thoughts, the ones that are worrisome, concerned, the ones that induce fear, that induce anxiety, that induce stress, that induce loneliness, that induce negative emotions, because thoughts are the source of negative emotions. Almost all of them are happening outside of your control. You don't wake up in the morning and say, I'd like to think some negative thoughts today, or I'd like to think some thoughts that cause me worry, or I'd like to think some thoughts that cause me stress. You don't do that. Yet those thoughts happen. So the addiction is an addiction to thinking that with the slightest bit of examination, you should leave this call, hopefully, with a recognition that it's true, or at least come to it very quickly after our time together. With the slightest bit of recognition, it will become easily apparent to you that you're having so many thoughts out of your conscious control that are happening automatically that don't benefit you. As a matter of fact, they do the opposite. They cause you feelings like anxiety, stress, overwhelm, fear, doubt, shame, embarrassment, loneliness. So as soon as you recognize, oh, these thoughts I'm having that pop into my head and are repeating themselves and cause me pain, If it wasn't an addiction, you would say, well, I'm going to stop. No more of those, no more of those thoughts. But the nature of an addiction is when you recognize that you have a behavior that isn't beneficial, that is harmful to yourself and maybe others around you. And yet it's so extraordinarily difficult to stop that behavior. That's an addiction, right? That's what some people do with alcohol. That's what some people do with drugs. That's what some people do with sex. That's what some people do with shopping. And yet the elephant in the room for humanity is lost in thinking that causes us suffering. So in 2013, I realized, wow, I'm having all these thoughts all day. They're happening out of my control and they're not benefiting my life. They're doing the opposite. I need to break this addiction to all of these thoughts happening without me. Eckhart Tolle's work, the author of Power of Now and A New Earth, became really important to me. They were my guide to what to do about this situation. And Eckhart Tolle says it really well. He says, thinking is great, but most people aren't thinking their thoughts. Most people are their thoughts are thinking them. Now, if you want proof that your thoughts are thinking you most of the time, just ask yourself if you've ever been in a scenario where you intend to do something else, like, oh, I'm gonna work on this right now. And yet at some point, maybe 10 minutes in, you kind of come out of a haze and you say, whoa, I was kind of doing that automatically. I forgot that I was working on that. And instead I was just off in a hallucination. It means your thoughts are thinking you. Conscious thinking would look like, now would be a good time to make plans for the future. And you would consciously think of productive plans for the future while you are still aware that you're perfectly where you are thinking about the future. So what I want you to know about me is the primary negative impact of my 88,000 thoughts a day without being at all under my control was loneliness, increasing loneliness, dark loneliness every now and then. And it was the time between bouts of loneliness was shortening. The loneliness was returning more often. It felt like a deeper form of suffering. If you had asked me in 2013, if there was some scenario where I could have a life where I didn't feel lonely, I would have told you no, that the loneliness I felt was just part of the human condition. But in my life for years now, I have not felt lonely at all. As a matter of fact, I've discovered the three major things that have happened to me from a presence practice is I don't get lonely anymore. And that is not dependent on other people giving me attention. This is the great miracle that a presence practice proved to me. The second great miracle of my life is I suffer at least 95% less than I did in 2013. What is suffering? We think of suffering, unfortunately, suffering, let's redefine it, because unfortunately suffering is, mostly it's assigned to, oh, those people that are starving without food are suffering. Those people living in the slums in India are suffering. I'm just having bad moods. The Buddha probably gave the best definition of suffering. And I can't quote it, but I do know that the Buddha was talking about a presence practice. Buddhists are talking about a presence practice. But actually all spiritual teachers, when you read their messages, the more messages I'm exposed to from all the great spiritual traditions, the leaders of those traditions, the holy ones, are leading you to be more present in your life. It's amazing, really, like it's amazing to see this unifying principle across all the great spiritual traditions. But here's the thing on suffering. If you have a bad emotion, a negative emotion, that is suffering. I invite you to look at it that way. Anger, you're suffering. Depression, you're suffering. Overwhelm, I feel overwhelmed, you're suffering. Loneliness, you're suffering. Stressed out, you're suffering. As a matter of fact, the nuances of the words, we seem to like to label suffering a lot of different flavors when it all could be called, oh my gosh, you're not feeling joyful, you're not feeling peaceful, you're not feeling loving, my friend, you're suffering. 95% at least of all the suffering I used to experience, in all those different words I just named, gone like it never existed from my life. I'd like to say it's miraculous, but it's not. It turns out it's your very nature to not suffer. The great, like I say, the if you will, the spiritual sages, the masters, the holy ones. I hope in your tradition, if you have one, you've noticed that they're trying to tell you that I can only speak to what I know. Listen. Peace, the great spiritual traditions are asking you to figure out who you are. The more present you become in your life, literally, just the more you become where you are without hallucinating about a future and hallucinating about a past, without your mind running away from you. The more you master that simple act, the more you discover that who you truly are is peace, is a person who's at great peace, seemingly almost no matter what, from the inside out for no reason, a person who experiences continual joy over almost everything around you, and a person that just feels love. Feels loved and feels like giving love. The spiritual teachers are trying to help us understand that's who you truly are. You don't have to go out and earn peace. You don't have to go out and earn love. You don't have to go out and create joy. If you were able to silence your mind, it doesn't have to be totally silent, but if you were able to still your mind, to lessen those 88,000 thoughts a day, or at least push them a sufficient distance away, you will discover what I know to be true by my experience. We're all the same. You'll be where I'm at. Well, I just feel peaceful, loving, and joyful almost all the time for no reason. So my loneliness went away. That's my primary state. And the third thing is miracles. The third thing is bona fide miracles, which I'll probably speak less to on this call. Because really my desire now in sharing this way with people, with everybody I can, is to help people suffer less, because I know they don't have to. I know suffering is quite optional. But the miracles are wonderful. What the miracles in short look like is the more you're present, the kinder life is to you. The more you go, wow, this universe supports me. It's like this universe loves on me all the time. Meaning it would not be uncommon at all. This is what I experience. Oh, it's easier to make money. It's my problems are often solved without my effort or my thinking or my worrying. They just seem to take care of themselves. I seem to have a joyful desire, and then shortly after be met with the perfect accomplice to help me reach the joyful desire. So, miracles from a presence practice, truly. All right, now I'm going to shift gears, and I'm going to teach you the greatest truth that I learned that allowed me to move out from the hallucinations and the 88,000 thoughts and the suffering, a technique into a deeper, I'm going to say into a deeper, consistent presence of being where I was without all this crazy crap. All right, it started, step number 1. Just notice when you're suffering. It's so important. And now you have a new definition for suffering. If you can catch like, hey, that's not a nice feeling I'm having, whether it's anger, loneliness, depression, stress, worry, as long as it's not a nice feeling, just allow yourself to notice it and say, even if it's been going on an hour before you notice it, which was quite often the case with me. But the better you get at your presence practice, the more you notice it immediately. Why? Because a presence practice brings you to a place where you almost always just feel peaceful and loving and joyous. So when there's a disruptive, negative feeling, it rings like a car alarm in your body right away. And you're like, whoa. So at the beginning of your presence practice, I would expect, and I would be kind to yourself and expect it could take you a long time before you notice that you're suffering. But as soon as you are, you want to move to step number 2. The great truth to all suffering, except physical pain, that's not a kind of suffering that I'm talking about addressing with a presence practice today. The great truth to all emotional and psychological suffering, to all of it, every time, 100%, is it was prompted by your thinking. Is you had a thought, a particular kind of thought, I'm going to show you how to find it. And that thought was like lighting the beginning of one of those dynamite cords. I forget what they're called. And in a matter of time, it might be a short fuse or it might be a long fuse. But that thought eventually, boom, triggered a negative emotion. So in the second step, you want to go looking for the thought that caused the emotion. Now, the thought pattern is always the same. You had a thought that was against something that was happening. And if you're taking notes, that's the note you would take on step 2 is look for the thought where I was against something that was happening. It's never different. Never is, for instance, in today's environment, it's so easy. You know, a lot of people, millions of people are suffering unnecessarily because they'll have a thought like, this pandemic shouldn't be happening. The fuse has been lit. The thought itself didn't carry an emotional punch and maybe didn't feel consequential, but the fuse has been lit in a certain amount of time. We don't know how big the explosion is going to be, but it's going to create a negative emotion because you had a thought in opposition to reality. The pandemic is happening. Another kind of thought, it could be, he or she shouldn't have said that to me, or that shouldn't have happened at my work, or I shouldn't have that little money in my bank account, or I shouldn't look this way, or I shouldn't have stubbed my toe, or my child shouldn't have behaved like that, or the waiter should have treated me different, or traffic shouldn't be this thick, or climate change shouldn't be a thing, or climate change shouldn't be happening at all, or Americans shouldn't be driving this, or that president shouldn't be in this, or that presidential candidate shouldn't be in this, or that tragedy shouldn't have occurred. See, 2020 is so painful because it's like the perfect concoction of that shouldn't be happening territory thoughts. It's like a hotbed for them. And thoughts that oppose reality, thoughts that oppose what is happening, cause emotional suffering. How do I know that's true? Because for 7 years, every time I have felt a negative emotion, I have said, I go looking for the thought that was in opposition to something that happened. It's always there, every time. And I'm not the first person to say it. I just speak to you from my personal experience. But if you're a student of Eckhart Tolle, like I was, you're going to discover this is what he's teaching. If you're a student of somebody else, like Michael Singer doesn't really put it this way, but they all are teaching you really the same thing. Okay, so, but I like to tell you from my experience because I only like to speak to what I know. Step number 3. Now you found the thought that was against what's happening. So you want to come back in. Look, if life is flowing this way, life has a flow to it. I want to toward the camera. Life has a flow this way. It just does. It's flowing a certain way in your life. For instance, let me use what's happening. The flow of life, down the river of life comes the label pandemic, comes newscasts that say we're in a pandemic, comes this thing. I don't even want to say if it is or if it isn't. I just want to say like life is flowing that way in the present moment. A thought, this shouldn't be happening, is opposing the flow. So what do you think is step number 3? Step number 3 is the great spiritual practice of saying, could you just allow that it happened because it happened? Not because you like it, not because you want it, not because you're voting for it. Could you allow that it happened because it happened? And you're not being asked to allow it to stay or remain that way. In this moment, the only one that's real, this moment right now, and I mean right now while we're on this Zoom together, if you could find a thought that you oppose, the practice is asking you to say, I'm asking you, is there any part of you that could allow, hey, I don't have to be opposed that it happened, that they said that to me, because I could allow that they did say that to me. I could just allow they said it to me. Allowance is the beginning of the end of suffering and the start of unbelievable magic or miracles in your life. I don't know why. I don't know how it has such a big impact. I know it does. But my guess is that when you oppose the force of life, good things don't happen. You're opposing. And when you create allowance, there's a flow that returns. And that flow is more divinely intelligent, if you will. But this is my guess. I just know it works. Now, step number 4. And here's the thing. If you accomplish step number 3, you just find I can allow in this moment that she said it to me. She did, in fact, say it to me. Because insanity is saying, I will not allow that she said it to me when, in fact, it was said to you. That is actual insanity. That is like, you can't allow that it happened because it happened. Imagine someone hits your car. Boom. You're okay. Everybody's okay. But you're like, I will not allow that somebody hit my car. I'm opposed to it. You're like, but people standing next to you would say, but they did. It happened. So the practice step number 3 is to say, I can allow that somebody hit my car. Somebody clearly hit my car. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm asking you to allow it. So now when you do that, you have actually disarmed the opposing thought that causes emotional suffering, and you will actually feel your emotional suffering turn down, go away, especially if you can get to step number 4. Step number 4, the last step in a presence practice, in this particular aspect of a presence practice, is to say, so now that you're at allowance, you've opened the door to conscious energy, to something really fantastic. is there any part of you that could embrace that it happened? Is there any part of you, can you find one thought that could embrace, hey, it happened? Sometimes this has been very hard for me to do because I think it's so hard to see what happened is good in any way, except for one of the most profound moments I've had in the last 7 years, when I found my reason to embrace it every single time. See, I realized that to take a position that I can't embrace that happened means to take a position, you're taking a position that says, I can't embrace that because that is bad. Now imagine that you're like, no, I can't embrace it. It's definitely bad. Examine that thinking. If I'm standing next to you, I'm going to say, so you're certain it's bad? Positive. You bet everything, your life on that it's bad. Absolutely. That's a bad deed. Really? Okay. So in the big picture of the whole planet Earth and everybody involved, are you certain that was not supposed to happen? And you might feel something that says, I can't be sure it wasn't supposed to happen. In the totality of history that will come after us, or maybe whatever this whole universe is going to provide, are you positive in the big picture that you don't have, and none of us are ever going to have, that little event shouldn't have happened? And I told you, it was one of the biggest profound insights I ever had, because I started laughing because I realized in order to take a position that is definitely a bad thing, I have to have a God complex. You literally have to believe, listen, I know more than anybody in the entire universe. I can call that bad and that good. That's a God complex. So once I saw that, I like, look, I can do step number 4 for lots of reasons. One is that, you can take up that reason and maybe you already have it. You can believe that everything is happening for a higher good. You can believe that life is not happening to you. Life is always happening for you. It just does this in very mysterious ways sometimes. That is the 4-step process that I learned to use. And what it did is that eliminated 95% of my suffering. Negative emotion, find the opposing thought, turn the opposing thought into allowance. From allowance, take a step over to embrace. No more suffering. And actually, that's how I found my way out of loneliness also. I would feel lonely. I would go find the opposing thought. It's the same things. I won't repeat myself. Okay. Now, let's move on here. I'm going to check the time here really quick. Yeah, almost out of time. So I want to tell you this. I'm going to tell you these things about a presence practice fast. Fast. I use stop signs because when I realized, look, I've got to find a way to distance myself from these 88,000 thoughts that are happening out of my control. And I made this front and center in my life, top priority above all else. One device I used, because I was setting up reminders all day long to just say, Patrick, are you off? Is your mind, did those 88,000 thoughts take you off on a hallucination to the future or the past that's causing you pain and suffering? So I wanted to keep interrupting. And the answer most of the time was, yeah, I couldn't believe how often a day that I was living in the past, little mini hallucinations of the future or the past. So I would use stop signs. They're a really great tool. So if you come to a stop sign, imagine that it says, stop thinking for a moment. Like stop thinking for 30 seconds. I would come to red light, say, oh, stop. And I would try and stop thinking. Just try and stop thinking while you're at the light. That is an opportunity for many people several times a day to just say, can I take conscious control over my mind? And can I say, I don't want to think right now. It's not important to be thinking. It's not important at all to be thinking most of the day. That's what they don't teach us. And it's revelatory when you figure that out. Some of the biggest revelations for me, and this is just a technique, you'll hear it, is the day I realized I don't have to have an opinion on everything. Isn't this something? Like somehow we end up feeling like, no, it's our job to have an opinion on everything. What if you don't have to have an opinion on everything? What if people can say, what do you think of that? And you can say, I don't. I don't have an opinion on that. And the other thing is, if you do have an opinion on something, there are two ways to hold it. One is with a grip, like it's really important. And that'll cause you suffering and people around you suffering if you hold your opinions like that. So I began picturing that my opinions were like flowers with vulnerable stems. So I have opinions, but I hold them loosely. I like having opinions on many things, but I don't want to cause negative energy or suffering to myself or other people by holding my opinions too tightly. So try out holding your opinions looser. And the last thing I'm going to slip in here real quick is judgment. So I had to come, as I watched my thoughts and got to know what they looked like and learned to interrupt them more often and take just moments of being where I was through my 5 physical senses, through one conscious breath. It has to be said, if all today you did was accomplish 10 seconds of presence that you had not accomplished the day before, and if all tomorrow you do is accomplish 10 seconds of presence that you hadn't done previously, these tiny increments cannot be discounted. I used to just marvel at, wow, I was only present, really, truly present a couple times per day, and yet the miracles were already starting to manifest and my suffering was already starting to go down. It doesn't take a lot. We're so not present most of our lives that a little bit of presence seems to allow in an immense amount of, I'm going to call it like highly intelligent, highly loving energy of some sort that is absolutely transformative to your life. Last thing. I mean, there's so much more I'd love to share with you, but the last thing, judgment. When you get to know the pattern of your 88,000 thoughts in your mind, you're going to discover a lot about the personality of those thoughts. Those thoughts taken together, when you're bonded with them, when they just happen and you don't notice they're happening, you're just kind of riding their wave. You're kind of just going on their train without noticing. Spiritual teachers call that your ego. That's ego. Ego is when you're having all these thoughts and you have no separation from them. They're ruling your life. You think a negative thought and then you feel negative. You think a lonely thought, you think a thought that causes you loneliness, later you feel loneliness. And so spiritual awakening is when you say, wait a minute, I can think a lonely thought. I can even transform that lonely thought back into allowance. And I'm sitting right here, always, and whenever I look in here, whenever I say, wait a minute, hold on, and just take a break from my thinking, I'm going to look in the center of my chest and see what I see. You will always see one of two things. You'll either see some emotions. They could look like any kind of emotion, any kind of hurtful emotion. You could see it. But I want you to see those for what they are. They're like clouds. Then I want you to look underneath the emotions. And you go, I'm really angry. Good, you're really angry. Okay, where? You see it? Yeah. Does it have a color? Okay. Now, around the angriness, behind the angriness, or to the side of the angriness, do you see any empty space? The answer will be yes, because we're all the same on the inside. And then when you try and describe the quality of the empty space, you're going to find the same words that I did, but maybe in your own flavor. But my friends would call me and say, how are you? And I'd say, I'd look inside and I'd find the empty space and I'd say, well, according to how I am on the inside, I'm just at peace. I'm profoundly okay was my first word. I have this profound sense of I'm okay, even though crazy things are happening in my life. Behind the crazy scenes, there are some emotions, but around and behind the emotions is this unbelievable, profound sense of okayness. Now, in me, that profound sense of okayness turned into a deep, unending sense of peace. And then that peace manifested, just became continual, the feeling of continual joy for very little reason all the time. And then the lovingness. And this is when a presence practice finally brings you full circle to, doesn't matter what's happening out here, just based on here for no reason and all I have to do is get my thoughts out of the way. I am always peaceful, loving, and joyous. And a spiritual master would then say, now you are learning who you truly are, because you were never that bundle of thoughts. That bundle of thoughts was like a roommate, a very nasty roommate, a disagreeable roommate, a judgmental roommate, a shit-stirring roommate, an opinionated, jerky roommate, a depressive roommate, an angry roommate that like moved into your house and took over and did it so effectively, so well that you forgot you lived there because your roommate was so dominant. So ultimately what a presence practice does, by just saying, look, I got to get away from my thoughts, I need a little distance from my thoughts, is move the roommate out. You like move the roommate to the garage. And then you're like, oh, it's nice to have my house back again. I can hear my roommate. He or she doesn't talk as much because I don't pay attention anymore. I don't give my roommate regard. But I can hear him trying to stir up shit, but here I am sitting in my deep peace. So I said the last thing and I meant it, but I have ways to extend the last thing, don't I? And it's around judgment. And it's just this, the primary character trait, one of the very primary character traits of your roommate is wanting to judge everything and every situation. And we'll end on this. What kind of judgment? That shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't be. Shouldn't have spoken to me. Bad person, bad happening, bad event, bad result in my bank account, bad stubbing of my toe. So a presence practice leads you to say, what if I stop judging everything? Instead of judging everything, I just say, I'm going to just allow that it happened and see what happens. So thank you for letting me share insights from my path of a presence practice. And my highest hope for the world, but mostly for you as an individual listening, is that you will take this up in diligence, hearing the promises that I'm telling you are real. And you'll say, those promises sound outrageously good. So I'm going to take it up based on the promise so that you experience the same thing I did. You become the next testimonial for, wow, it's real. All this stuff comes from just learning to be more present. Thank you.
Wow, man. That was so great. I just want to first say thank you for being here, and that there seemed to be a thread through here today of kind of work. There's a lot going on our side actually with just how technically things were playing out, and I think what I've kind of recognized even in the last couple of moments is like, we're here, and it's just a reminder of that. I know a few weeks ago you and I had a conversation regarding mortality, and we actually got to interview someone yesterday whose father is about to die, or has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that's kind of what was going through my mind when you talked about embracing it, and like how death is actually a powerful tool because it gives us, and it sharpens the edge on which we have to live this life, because it's all we have. This moment, is all that we have. And so, I just want to say thank you so much for or like I said, I want to say thank you for coming on here, and it's really incredible, really incredible
Thanks,
stuff.
Tim. Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to end it for the day. And yeah, to everybody listening, we'll be back on right after this for me to do some short wrap up with you, and then we'll be out of here. But yeah, thanks again, Patrick. Much appreciated.
I would like to thank you, Tim. Again, let me bookend this with a thank you to you and your team. This is a massive effort that you took up out of only love in your heart and only desiring to create impact for other human beings. Thank you, Tim. Beautiful play. And for those who may have a burning question of me, the best way to ask that question would probably be to find me on Facebook and send it as a private message on Facebook. Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. I really appreciate you, man. And I look forward to the next time we chat.
Thanks so much, Tim. I really appreciate you too. Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here. Spread the hopeful word.